Hello and welcome back to Rhythm Connect, the official podcast of Rhythm Foundation. I'm Umayal Eswaran, your host, and this is the show where we have conversations with people who are driving change in their communities and making an extraordinary impact in the lives of others. If this is your first time with us, please do remember to subscribe to the Rhythm Connect podcast so that you don't miss the inspiring stories we bring to you every month. On today's segment, I'd like to shine a light on a very important topic, the plight of stateless people. Did you know that there are currently 10 million stateless people in the world? People who are born stateless more often than not face a difficult life from the moment they are born and all the way till their last day. They are denied a legal identity at birth, and even upon death, they are denied the dignity of an official burial and certificate of death. It's more like they did not even exist in this world. A cruel irony in this is that most of the 10 million stateless people around the world right now were born and have lived their whole life in the very countries that deny them citizenship. Today, we dive into a discussion about the sobering reality of statelessness with our guest, Maalini Ramalo. Maalini is an advocate for the rights and inclusion of stateless communities and is the Director for Social Protection at the Development of Human Resources for Rural Areas known as DHRRA in Malaysia. Since 2006, DHRRA has supported and helped thousands of individuals to break free of the intergenerational cycle of statelessness that have entrapped their families. Thanks to DHRRA's continuous advocacy and social protection efforts, statelessness is no longer a hidden issue in Malaysia. I'm also proud to say that Rhythm Foundation has worked with Maalini and DHRRA for several years to support the needs of stateless children in Malaysia. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation today to shed light on this extremely important issue and find out how we can help. Thank you for joining us today, Maalini.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
Let's go quickly into the questions because I have quite a number of them. I think a lot of people understand or know, statelessness, but I don't really think they understand the ramifications and what these people actually go through emotionally, in their lifetime if you actually don't have any kind of identification to support that can actually let you live a decent life. Let's start with a fundamental question to help our audience understand this issue. Could you explain in layman's terms what is statelessness and what circumstances cause it in the millions around the world?
Sure. So, statelessness actually means somebody without citizenship. They don't have a choice to choose a citizenship and tell that, no, I don't want your citizenship and that's why I'm without citizenship. But rather, they are really in a situation no country can give them citizenship. So that is statelessness. And people often say that, they are foreigners and that's why they are not, we should not help stateless people, but that's not true. And so it's really, really clear in layman term that in whichever country they belong or any country that they might be connected strongly to, none of these countries can give them citizenship. And that's why they are in such kind of situation.
I know that you have gone outside of Malaysia. You've been invited and you have attended conferences addressing statelessness around the world. Now, in the ASEAN context, the statelessness, it's more like it's our backyard, right, of Malaysia. So can you shed some light on, because statelessness itself, there's complexity to it, right? There's so many categories which I kind of didn't realize. Who is comes under the category of statelessness?
So the first fun fact, which is something that we all shouldn't be proud of, is the largest population of statelessness is actually in the Asia Pacific. I think when we dive into the different categories of statelessness, we could have pre-independence population, the British rulers or different rulers actually brought laborers from different countries and moved them around this region. And then when these countries actually got their citizenship, there could be a possibility of sort of discrimination and leaving a particular ethnic group, and most of the time they are minorities, and they were left without citizenship. And so this category generally would have multi-generational citizenship issues because they have children and they could have gone third generation, fourth generation without documents. Oftentimes, the issue only comes to attention if there's intermarriage between somebody who has citizenship with this population. That's when the issues comes up. And different countries have different circumstances. Like for Malaysia, the pre-independence population were given a red IC, which is actually a permanent residency. People often mistaken just because they have an identity card, it means that they have citizenship. But no, a permanent residency just means you have a residency card. It does not mean you have a citizenship. And so different countries have found way to treat the pre-independence population. Now, moving on to other categories, I would say one of the largest prevalent issue is childhood statelessness. Childhood statelessness is actually when a child is born stateless and throughout their life. See, the pre-independence population, very unlikely they are born stateless, but rather because of the movement of the colonial arrangements and the ruling that certain powers were present in these Asian countries.
Yeah.
But for childhood statelessness, they're actually caused by citizenship laws that we practice. And these citizenship laws come from Malaysia per se, common law, and different countries are going to have references to different countries' laws that they have adopted to. It's very interesting to note that it can be very patriarchal, because maybe it is assumed that a woman would not leave the country, and so she would not be required to have the ability to pass on citizenship overseas, if at all she left.
Right.
So we've got a gap of law there because today's generation is very different. A lot of women actually have left our countries and we have started families elsewhere and we have returned home. And to have a child without a Malaysian citizenship or, an Indonesian citizenship is an issue. So since I mentioned about Indonesia, I think a lot of the ASEAN countries have actually addressed their laws to ensure that even if men and women, if they are overseas and they give birth, they could still access citizenship from overseas. So these are some really good countries like Indonesia, Philippines per se. I think they are definitely on track in addressing statelessness as well. They've recently also introduced a foundling law. Many of us would have heard about child being left or abandoned. A foundling child is, a newborn child just left somewhere and you have to figure out what to do with them.
Yes.
And I think throughout my life, I've seen so many of those covered in newspaper,
Yes.
but it's never a question, what is the child's citizenship? And today when I work in this, I realize citizenship is the greatest challenge. And if this child does not have a background, is not left with any documents, and obviously parents don't want to leave any documents because they don't want to be traced back, what happens to this child? And this child live without any documents, any citizenship throughout their life. And it's really, really heartbreaking when systems start asking the children, like, go and bring your parents, go and find your parents, when they were not responsible of the circumstances they were left.
Right.
So that's one category of foundling, abandoned children. You also have these children then eventually being adopted. But some countries, the laws, they don't allow, just because you have adopted a child, you could get an automatic citizenship.
Yeah.
And I would say one of the largest issue, which is to do with perception, right? Children born out of wedlock. I think in today's age, we should not differentiate a child that is born pre-marriage or post-marriage or whether in unwed marriage. That's really not a problem. But a lot of countries, and of course, I think having a marriage registration is a protection for a woman. But because of having the marriage registration is a necessary mechanism to acquire citizenship for the child, a lot of countries have this legitimacy law. Like in Malaysia, we have this law, which is Section 70, that says that if you're a child from an unwed marriage, then you should only follow your mother's citizenship. But the problem here is, what if the mother herself is stateless? What if the mother has abandoned the family? And that's how children become stateless, because they really can't trace who the mother is. How do we find information about the mother? And I think in ASEAN, as you spoke about our neighbor and how interchangeably we depend on each other for laborers.
Yes.
I think it's bound to happen, and it is happening, that there would be a lot of intermarriages between this country. And unfortunately as well, just because they are on work permits, and the government says, no, if you're on work permit, you're not allowed to get married. And what happens if the person's already pregnant and already giving birth? There's no way to fix this whole scenario, because I think when you're talking about the labor group, for them is earning the money and sending it back home or surviving. And they would not choose to let go of their work permit to come back with certain documentation that does not give you the rights to work. And to choose between a child that is coming and to put food on the table, I think having a marriage registration and going through the very lengthy process is the last thing they want to do. And so I would say these are the major categories that I would say in situ statelessness. But I think as we speak, we should also recognize the fact that we have refugees who are stateless as well. In that case, shifting the lens to Myanmar, we have the Rohingyans who are stateless. So of course, I would say in the whole world right now, the Rohingyans refugees are the largest population who are stateless. There have been a lot of negotiation with the countries that has happened, but I don't think ethnic group is being recognized the way they would like to be. So there's really not a solution yet, but they are the largest population that we have, and that's coming back to the beginning. Asia does have the largest population of statelessness.
I'm just thinking about, even pre-Merdeka, like for Malaysian context, and you have people who are stateless and they have lived like that. At the end of the day, we can name these people something stateless, whatever, but they're all human beings, right? I mean, we all believe that they do have a right to live. When we talk about children, we say that every child, the basic right to education. But today, that's not possible simply because they don't have a paper, right? So how far have we come, you think, from the time of, let's say, if we take Malaysian context, independence time, or let's talk about the ASEAN concept. One side we talk about economic, social advancement, then
Exactly.
the other side, we are worse than a third world nation. How far do you think that we have come? Are you satisfied with the progress that we have made? Or what would be the progress for you? Next 10 years? Next 15 years?
I hear you. I mean, it's my 7th year in this organization. And the frustration is real. And the journey feels very, very slow. But at the same time, we knew that things that we were trying to overcome, they were really huge hurdles. And these huge hurdles that we have overcome over the years is what motivates us to push forward, right? Because today I am just going to be satisfied when somebody texts me and say, I finally got my citizenship. Even though it took them 4 years or 5 years after being rejected, probably 10 more years prior of me knowing that person. That's just going to make your day. And another day, just simply, this ministry just responding to you and telling like, oh, we hear you, we get your point, finally we get you. That makes your day. So I would say, if I were to speak on the perspective of an organization and the journey that we have had, I would say we have progressed well, very well for us. DHRRA as an organization, when we started, we didn't even know that we should call that stateless. right? We were like, oh my God, why does somebody have different color IC? Like, was there a printing issue? Why were they not getting certain services that others were getting, right? And we were like lost, and we had to reach out to a lot of regional and global activists, academicians, to figure out like what could be this possibility. Why is there like this group of people who are in conflict with the law that they cannot access citizenship? And then we realized like, oh, we had this pre-independence arrangement. There was an understanding that the people would remain here. And so they should have gotten a citizenship, and they have applied. And why are they being rejected? On what basis they were being rejected? So from using the word stateless, for being told that statelessness don't exist in this country. And today, when you look at newspapers, sometimes wrong referrals of statelessness, but we're just proud the term is being used. We're just grateful, you know. See, we don't get pissed off just because somebody who is not stateless is now being called stateless, because we're like, oh my God, finally they're using the term. Because there's really, really a very vulnerable situation that comes with statelessness. But I think being in statelessness, that whole scenario itself, it's life full of vulnerability, life full of limitation, and life full of rejections. And that's a very different situation to be in. So going back as an organization, I think the way we have targeted is like, okay, we don't have data, we're going to find data. Now we have data, let's now advocate with the government. Okay, the community now needs assistance. We need to get them to be in the school. Like, how do we ensure them being in the school? So these were the things that we are targeting on, and we were trying to make lots of policy changes, and we really have a good policy. And now we're working for bigger targets, like, you know, ensuring that people who haven't got to submit their applications are able to do so, even though they're 21 years old and above. So we're targeting all the small loops that prevents people to even be able to submit application. So that's a whole journey by its own.
Yeah.
But for me as an activist, I think good 4 years I was just learning, because the variability was so much. The type of application and the type of evidences that you need to bring to the table was just so different from one case to the other. And before I had the capacity to speak up, even though I had a good understanding of the issue, I needed that experience to have seen enough people, of thousands of people, to know that, okay, I can't go wrong in that. And in that sense, despite all the works that goes in that background, I think the progress is very difficult to measure, because at the time then we get to meet the minister or people or policymakers who are able to, you know, bring the changes, you probably just get 20 minutes to speak to that person.
That's true.
And that's frustrating.
I think we've all been there. I think even when we partnered with you, with DHRRA, and started, you know, working, until we actually started working with you, collaborating, we did not understand the depth of, you know, why each application is taking so long to get, and why is it costing so much? Because this is the birthright of that child or the person or the individual. So much of resources that we have to, you know, give in order to get what is their birthright. We kind of learned in that process how much you guys have to do in order to even get that one citizenship or one paper for that one child or one individual. And this is something I think a lot of people need to know. And I realized, I think during that process, that's one of the things that we did as well, the library. Because these are for people that stateless who actually can't get. If you do something like that, at least they have an access to it. So is there things like this that individuals or organizations who are out there can do, which we know we can't get everyone the papers? But is there something like this that we can do for these children so they at least have that access to the education?
Yeah, I envision a day where stateless people or persons with lived-in experience of statelessness actually speaking up for themselves. And for them to be able to speak up, they need to be able to have access equally like any one of us to education, exposure, experience. And we all knew that someone who is stateless is going to have limitation to access education. Different countries have different pathways to get into schooling, but not all of them allow them to public schools. And that's a huge gap. That's already treating a child differently, just because you don't have a minimum document. But that said, I would really say that we should, ensure that education is a priority. So any organizations, individuals around the world, if you want to assist a stateless person or even an organization that works on statelessness, I think your priorities are definitely going to be, can you be that person that elevates their trouble to, to something better, right? So if they are a children who is only able to complete their primary and secondary education, will you be able to change that one child's life to ensure they access tertiary education? Would you be able to multiple the numbers? And that's the smallest thing you can do. And if you have a company or an organization that hires people, will you be willing to hire someone who is stateless and treat him equally? And I also have been in a lot of situations where stateless kids who have completed their education but couldn't get into tertiary because they just didn't have the money. And so they go into part-time works and, employees actually telling them, you don't have documents and you can't report against me, so I'm not going to pay you this month.
That's sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think nations are not seeing the bigger problem that can arise from this. Going and finding a job and the employer kind of taking advantage of their statelessness. These kids or youth, children can get frustrated. And then they can go the other way.
Yes.
They can go, either they can become part of the gangs, or girls can prostitute, because it's easy money.
Exactly. And I think the country should be worried. A lot of countries in ASEAN has actually addressed a lot of their nationality laws, gaps on statelessness. I think their perspective, if in long term we can't afford to have somebody who does not have access to all of this just because we want to call them stateless, or we want to leave them and exclude them and say you don't belong. I think it's very important to logically think that if they're stateless, that means there's no way to fix this and how it's going to impact you on development in long term. But since you mentioned, then I think throughout my career there's only a few cases that has caught me off guard. And I just want to narrate this particular case. The parents came to me and they said that they wanted a lawyer to take up the daughter's adoption case. The child is legally adopted but hasn't gotten a citizenship even though she's 17 years old. And I was like, oh no, I don't want you to spend, because resources for lawyers is expensive. And I would say the court processes in Malaysia don't make it simpler for them. And sometimes 20K, 30K, very easily. And DHRRA didn't have resources, and at that time we were just only doing strategic litigation and we were not doing like volume cases. So I was convincing them, you're old, you don't have money, you just have some saving, and I think just wait in, we will, the applications will get through at one point. And they were literally sitting there and their eyes were getting teary and they were begging me, no, just find me the best lawyer we can. We want to give every money. And they were actually showing me their EPF statement and say, no, I can give you this money. Don't worry. Just, I know you are the source of all that access to all these people who could help me. And that's the only time, because I was going to leave them and let someone else to handle. And she held my hand, and then I decided, you know what? I'm just going to sit with her and I'm going to speak in Mandarin, because I speak Mandarin too.
Oh, wow.
And I wanted to make her feel like she's here, but she needs to understand that it's really going to waste a lot of money, because at that stage a lot of court cases were being turned down and there's a lot of loss of money. And she said something to me. She said, I adopted this child and I did not tell this child that she was adopted. And when she was 15 years, she found out in her school that she was adopted. And since then, she could not deal with her identity, her thoughts, the mental pressure that came to her in terms of finding out who is she as a person. And I was still not disturbed, because this is what I hear every day. And I was like, oh no, auntie, you should have told her, but it's fine. Let's get her through counseling and everything else. And then she says to me, no, but it's beyond control of any damage that has happened. And I was like, what do you mean? I still can fix it for you. Don't worry. Money is not the only solution to it. And she said that, no, she's actually moved out. She demanded me to buy a car for her, which I did. And now she comes back home. When she doesn't get what she wants, she hits us. And this is an 18-year-old stateless child who has never had anything, and found out that the reason why I was completely rejected throughout my life is because I didn't have citizenship. And when I go and find out like why didn't I get citizenship, it's because my parents adopted me. And now when I ask my parents, who did you adopt from, there wasn't really identity of the biological parents. And the pain that the family carried was something that I was thrown away, because it was the first in my career to see that an adoptive parents was getting hurt because they could not manage the circumstances that came out, not only because your child was adopted, but because she was already wondering why was I not given the equal opportunity like any other kids? Why was I being treated differently? And so to that girl who is young and vulnerable, who is hurt, for her is, if you didn't adopt me, even if I had lived in the slums, or even if I had lived in the streets, I would have had an identity. And these parents were like, and I want to accept that is my mistake, so let it be. I want to give my money for this. And that was the time that, I took a moment and realized the mental hurt and the impact on these children is something that I didn't pay attention to. No one is paying attention to, because the amount of work that comes into getting documents is 10 times harder. And no one is looking into how they feel, how they're being treated. And that's something that I'll hold very dearly as a reminder throughout my life, that that's something no one has ever looked into.
And I remember you making that strong statement, don't hold the children responsible for the mistake of whoever gave birth to them. And I say that all the time, because don't hold the child responsible and don't destroy the future of the child. And they are going to become more and more burden than, supporting a nation. And we talk about youth, the next generation being our future. But what kind of future are we going to leave for the stateless children, right?
Indeed. That's something that, I've had so much of difficulty to comprehend, especially when you're speaking to policymaker. It feels like a thin line, isn't it? Like national security. And on the other hand, you're talking about humanity. What are you going to do with kids just because they were born in such a circumstances? Do you want to punish them for life? Because it's really not their fault to be formed and actually turn out to be a child that falls on earth with no parents to be responsible of, or the circumstances of the parents' marriage, right? So that's something I think, speaking less of national security, and of course, as a devoted Malaysian and loyal Malaysian, any country loyalty that we all hold on to, national security is important. And there would be certain features to protect and have a process to ensure we are actually only identifying and protecting the stateless people. And the best thing to do next is actually facilitate their process to get a citizenship. Right? Because there's really not that much of volume. It's just people's wrong perception. And the most vulnerable and that should be protected would be protected. And so I think that's where the humanity comes in. And I think because people's lack of understanding on the word statelessness has really caused a lot of confusion. And because we have chosen not to be literate about the issue, kids are suffering because of this. Actually, I wanted to mention this, our relationship with Rhythm Foundation. I think it was really a mutual relationship of learning from both sides. And this is a heavy problem. And because of that heavy problem, people are generally not very interested to take part in. And thank you for being so patient, because you guys were genuinely learning through this process as we figured it out as well. So as emotional I could be, I'm very, very thankful for trusting me with this, and thank you.
I think sometimes partnerships takes time, right? But it has to sync, because for us it's about how that partnership can make a difference. It's not about the money, but the people.
Correct.
Like I told you, that I think when we really went into it with you guys, and we realized how, like you said, that heavy topic it is, And sometimes people don't want to discuss it. Sometimes people don't want to see it. But I don't like to do that because I think they are very much part of our society and who we are. And therefore, we must somehow find ways and means to help them. Thank you for your time, Maalini. And I think we need more people like you.
Thank you.
Fighting for these kids, being there, whether it's emotionally or just being there as a human being and supporting them. And I think our organization, as in Rhythm Foundation, we came to know more and went deep into it and understanding is because we were involved with DHRRA. We woke up to the fact that, my God, it's not that easy even for one child to get through this process, So I hope this conversation between us that people, it's more to create awareness and people to understand it. And if someone out there, an organization or an individual or a corporation who wants to do something, and we would like them to come forward and be able to, help these stateless individuals. According to what UNHCR said, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. So I think we just need to keep saying that they are also human beings, and so we need to respect, and they have their rights and dignity, and therefore let's find a way to give it to them. All right, and thank you so much, Maalini. We appreciate having you here with us. And to our audience, join us again next time for another episode of Rhythm Connect, where we hope to bring you more insightful conversations with change makers, social advocates, and the real people behind the cause you care about. Remember to subscribe to our podcast to be notified when we have a new episode up on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcast. And be sure to follow Rhythm Foundation, that's RYTHM, on Facebook and Instagram to learn more about the work we do around the world. Links are in the episode description. Thanks for tuning in today, and I'll see you next time.